Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're going to talk about 3 recent WWE releases. At the time of this recording, 3 WWE wrestlers released just a few days ago, that being Indi Hartwell, Tegan Knox, and Baron Corbin. And I want to talk about what I see next for these wrestlers, where I think they could go, what I think their career could be. I could easily see all 3 coming back in 6 months, a year, but I want to talk about what I think is possible for them next. Now, before I do get into this, I want to say I'm a fan of all 3 of these wrestlers. I think they all have a lot of untapped potential. Even though that all 3 of them have been with the WWE for several years, I don't think that any of the 3 reach the heights that I think they're capable of. So with that being said, let's start with our first of the 3, Indi Hartwell. First thing we're going to talk about, she's most likely going to go back to her real name, Samantha D. Martin, which is the name she used prior to coming into WWE. Indi is the youngest of the 3 at 28 years old, which is still extremely young for a wrestler. With as much experience as she has behind her, it's amazing how young she is. And I could easily see her going down the road that her former partner and friend, Steph DeLander, the former Persia Pirotta, did, and being somewhat of an indie darling / TNA wrestler. So for her, I see her mainly competing in TNA / GCW. And I think the reason why she chooses to go this route is I would think Indi wants to stay on the WWE radar, and with the WWE and TNA working together, this would be an easy way for her to get some quote-unquote reps under her belt, show off what she could do with some amazing wrestlers, maybe get a little bit more exposure, be able to build her brand up. And it's something I'm also going to talk about on another wrestler here. Her possibly going somewhere like TNA, maybe with the working agreement, she can work out something that if she wrestles in TNA, she gets to keep the Indi Hartwell name. I don't necessarily see it happening, but it's possible. I didn't think I would see WWE and TNA working together, so there is that. I think this is the best route for her. I think this is the easiest way to keep her name and keep her fresh in the minds of WWE, because I do think I see her eventually coming back. I think her talent is perfect fit for the WWE. She has a perfect combination of charisma and in-ring ability that they love there. Her storytelling ability back from the days of the Way and Index makes her a great candidate for a rehire. Now next up, Tegan Knox. Tegan Knox is just a year older than Indi, being 29 years old, which is still very young. Each of these 2 wrestlers can easily have 10 more years of wrestling under their belt, so I'd expect to maybe see them back in WWE at some point. Tegan, who went by Nixon Newell before WWE and probably will go back to that, she's the one of the 3 that I could see AEW having the most interest in, mostly because before WWE, Tegan Knox had a very big buzz as one of the top independent women's wrestlers in the world. And not a knock on Indi or Baron Corbin, but of the 3, I think she's the best in-ring wrestler, which is something that's very valued in AEW. I can also see this because of AEW's connection with New Japan, which therefore also gives her a connection with Stardom. I could see her going into Stardom. I think she has wrestled in Stardom previously when she was mostly wrestling in the UK indie scene. But I easily see her being the one that AEW out of the 3 would want the most. I see that as her landing spot. I would love to see her go into the indies for some matches, mainly because if you remember in NXT for a while, she was calling herself Lady Kane, and she could play off the whole Kane variant craze that's going through the indies, whether it be Blue Kane or Gain, which I hope you've seen both of these because they're both really good characters and really funny take on the Kane character, which Kane is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. These 2 versions of Kane, Blue Kane or Blue Pain, being the cold version of Kane, and Gain being the LGBTQ plus version of Kane, I think they're awesome. I would love to see her be Lady Kane, maybe like in something teaming with one of them, or both of them, or in a 3-way with the other 2. I think Tegan Knox is most likely going to go to AEW, it makes the most sense out of the three for me. Now, last but not least, Baron Corbin. Baron Corbin is the oldest of the three at 40 years old, and while nowadays 40 isn't tremendously old for a wrestler, it is also a crossroads for someone like Corbin. You have to remember that prior to WWE, Baron Corbin was a professional football player, and he has a lot of wear and tear on his body. Could he just decide to hang up his boots and say, you know, I'm done with this? That's a high possibility. Where I think Baron would work the best, and his real name is Thomas Pestrak, he hasn't wrestled other than WWE that I know of, so I don't know what he would use. Maybe he would use his real name. I'm guessing that would be what it would be. But he's another person I think that would benefit from being in TNA and keeping that kind of a role, keeping, again, that connection with WWE. I could see him being there and kind of being the conduit for wrestlers that WWE maybe wants to bring in that are under TNA contract. He could wrestle a guy like Joe Henry or Jonathan Gresham and kind of be the guy that, with his WWE connection, goes, yeah, this guy has it, you can bring him in. Somewhat like a quasi-scout, which is another role I think would work well for him. I think he would also work well as a trainer if he just wants to hang up his boots. He's so entrenched with the WWE way that I think he'd be a great trainer for a next generation of wrestlers, especially for the PIL wrestlers, the ones that came from other sports. He could help them transition into WWE. I think he would also be an awesome commentator, even if he only does it as something like Reality of Wrestling, which we're seeing WWE is going to work with as part of their ID plan. Or maybe he goes and helps train at the Knox Academy or another one of these wrestling companies that's part of the ID plan. I think there's a lot that can be done with him that doesn't necessarily mean an in-ring competitor, and that does not mean that I want him to stop wrestling. I like Baron Corbin. I think he's a great talent. I think a lot of times he's handed absolute dog shit and he turns it into gold. Bum Corbin and Happy Corbin are some of his best work, in my opinion. I thought his tag team with Braun Breaker was fantastic, and I thought maybe they should have brought them up as a team. But for me, I could see TNA being his landing place. I could also see him doing a podcast on YouTube, which I think would be highly successful. I think he's a smart, well-educated, good talker. I think he could be what we're kind of missing in the podcast world of wrestling. Because if you look at it, a lot of the most popular podcasts, whether it be Cornette, a guy that was famous in the 80s and 90s, or even some of the other ones, we don't have someone that's as tied to this generation as Corbin would be. I could see him doing that. I could see him doing a barbecue channel with, as much as he loves to put his barbecue stuff on his social media. That would be another route for him. I always thought that ever since the WWE Network, they should have branched out into different things like that. Had talk shows, had maybe a cooking show. Stuff that they make just for the network, or in this case Peacock or Netflix or wherever, maybe even just their YouTube. Maybe they could do a Cooking with Corbin on their YouTube, and that's where he goes with his career. I'd love to see anything he does. I think the guy is ultra talented. I think he's, like I said, he's eloquent, he's intelligent, he's someone that I'm going to want to see what he does next. I do think TNA is a good spot for him to land. That's my opinion of him. Now, with all these three wrestlers, I wish them all the success in the world. I think all three of them are very talented. They're all wrestlers I've cheered for. They're all wrestlers that I've wanted to go really far. All three of them, I think, have not reached the top of their potential. And I'd love to see them do that. I'd love to see all three of them reach into that untapped potential that they haven't been able to yet. And who knows, maybe 5 years from now, we'll see Tegan Knox and Indi Hartwell as a main event of WrestleMania fully realize their potential. Baron Corbin on the main event of the other night, or calling the match. As I've said, I think he'd make a fantastic announcer. But whatever they do, I'm going to be watching. I'm going to continue to be a fan of these three talented wrestlers. I hope you will as well. Let me know what you think. Where do you think each of these wrestlers is going? Who do you think has the best potential? What do you think the best fits for them would be? With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching Heel Heat.